From the BBC World Service, in association with ABC and Akashvani, this is Stumped.
Hello, I'm Alison Mitchell and welcome to Stumped. With me for the ABC in Sydney is Jim Maxwell and Sunil Gupta for Akashvani is in Delhi. Now, former England captain Joe Root is up to second on the all-time list of test run scorers behind only the great Sachin Tendulkar. After his century in the fourth test against India. He moved above South African all-rounder Jacques Kallis, India great Rahul Dravid, and Australia's former captain Ricky Ponting with a magnificent 150 at Old Trafford. Root finished that match then with 13,409 runs in what was his 157th test. Tendulkar played 200 test matches and in fact played in Root's debut in Nagpur in 2012. Sunil, how are Root's exploits being received in India? Are fans starting to worry about him passing Tendulkar at some stage in the future, albeit he's still, more than 2,000 runs behind at the moment?
Right now, no. Ravi Shastri had a bit to say about it in the media, but Sachin hasn't commented on it at all. I mean, I scarred everything that I could possibly. And I think that's absolutely right, because it's still quite a way to go. And if you ask me, actually, I think the Ashes coming up in Australia at the end of this year are going to be his acid test, because I think you know and Jim knows that his Ashes record, especially in Australia, isn't that good. So to my mind, that's one mountain he has to climb if he has to think of the summit of Tendulkar's 15,000 plus runs.
Jim, how highly do you rate Joe Root? And he's number 2 now, officially. Is he up there as your top 2 test batters of all time in the men's game?
No, I wouldn't say that. There's been a lot of very good players. He's one of them. I think we go too much on these numbers. And, you know, there's Bradman, and then after that, you can rattle them around. Tendulkar, Lara, Joe Root's pushing up there just because of the numbers. They're mightily impressive. We get too carried away with all these claims because of certain people hitting milestones in the game. I think we get a bit overwhelmed. I mean, if you just want to run on stats in the game, Jacques Kallis is the greatest all-rounder the game's ever seen. Well, I think that's nonsense, because Sobers was just exceptional, extraordinary, amazing, but his numbers aren't quite as good as Kallis's. Joe Root's going to be one of the greats of the game. Definitely the greatest Yorkshire batsman of all time.
Well, it did feel like quite a moment when he passed Ricky Ponting to take that number 2 slot in the all-time test run scorers list. Let's speak to someone who has analysed what it takes to score a mountain of test runs. Cricket writer and broadcaster Jarrod Kimber recently released a book called The Art of Batting, The Craft of Cricket's Greatest Run Scorers. Jarrod, welcome to Stumped. What a perfect time to have you on. First of all, on Joe Root, what is it that makes him so effective with the bat?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I have to say is that I disagree with Jim. I think Len Hutton is still Yorkshire's greatest batter. But I think he obviously has this incredible history where he grew up on a pitch in Yorkshire that spun, which is not particularly common. He then had a Pakistani player as his coach at a young age. So he learned how to play spin in a different way. So he combines being able to play on English wickets where the ball's nipping around with incredible play of spin. And I remember the first innings at Nagpur thinking, are we sure this guy's come from England? Like, he does not look like a traditional English player. He's also a back foot player, right? So it hasn't quite translated to Australian pitches, but we've certainly seen him in South Africa and on faster pitches play great. So if you put those 3 things together, the ability to play the lateral moving ball, spin, and faster bowling, you're already on a really good trajectory. But I would also add that I think he's probably the best strike rotator I think I've seen in modern cricket. His ability to get off strike is, I mean, it's just remarkable. And so if there is anything going on in the wicket or a bowler's on top of him for a moment, he just finds a single all the time. And everyone I talk to about Joe Root, people want to talk about his timing and his, professionalism and all this, but they all end up talking about the fact that he can get off strike. And that is such a huge part of batting, right? If you give a great bowler 18 balls directly at you, he's probably eventually going to get you out. But if he keeps having to, recalibrate because you're on and off strike, that's a lot tougher. And I think that's one of maybe his greatest super skill is the ability to hit the ball anywhere on the offside or the leg side and just find one.
And what about the way he has evolved over the years? All batters adapt and evolve. How would you say he's done that?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is, if it's funny that Jim was bringing up Callis before. There's no doubt that Callis is one of the greatest batters who's ever lived. But Callis played these same innings every single time, right? He played the George Callis innings. Boycott is probably another player who's quite similar to that. Occasionally, they could break out of that. Joe Root, 2/3 of the way through his career, or 3/4 of the way through his career, just went, they're playing this baseball stuff. Oh, okay, I'll give this a go. Great players don't usually bend to what their team strategy is. The team strategy usually bends to them, right? The fact that he could suddenly do that, up his strike rate, and still be great, in the way that he has over the last few years, I think is another remarkable thing. And it's not that star players can't do that. It's that star players don't usually even think of doing that, right? I'm very good. I will continue to do that. So the evolution from that point of view, I think, is remarkable. And also, he got over the emotional thing of making 50s and getting out, right? Which it probably is going to affect his overall legacy rather than, on a game-by-game basis. But he's no longer worried about just getting to 50 and getting out. And that was a big issue that he had. And he's not the only player ever that's had, that sort of issue before.
It's a sign of a batter, isn't it? They can come through more difficult periods in their career. Now, for the book, you spoke to the likes of David Bumble Lloyd, Nasser Hussain, Rahul Dravid, Brian Lara as well. From those conversations you had with them, what is it that makes the very best batters stand out from the very, very good ones?
There was some incredible conversations. Jim will like this story. There's a guy called Bob Knocker-White who played for Middlesex for 10 years and then for Nottingham for 10 years. And then he umpired for the next 30 years. He was basically standing on a cricket field for 48 years of his professional life, never really had a job other than cricket. And he would play with Sobers. And he would go up to Sobers and he'd be like, how do I do this? And can you help me with this? And Sobers would give him all these tips. And Bob Knocker-White, as the professional he is, would go back in the nets and work on this thing, and he'd get bowled. And he'd be like, I just don't think Garfield Sobers is speaking the same language. And that's the sort of thing that even Rahul Dravid would say that about Brian Lara and Sachin Tendulkar, right? Like even Rahul Dravid can see that there's another level up. And a lot of that is subconscious. And it's the thing that we can't teach. There are some times where it's just it might be an eyesight or the way that someone reads the game. There's a good story that Nasser Hussain talks about where he looks up, Graham Gooch says, you can see the way this guy puts the ball in his hand, what he's going to bowl. And Nasser Hussain turns around and looks up and he's like, he's 40 meters away. Like I can barely see his fingers. Like I can tell there's a bowler over there. So there are little things that these players have and their ability to read the situation. And AB de Villiers said one of the best humble brags I think I've ever heard. And he didn't say it in a really arrogant way, but he went, when I'm in the bubble and everything's working and flowing and, it's all subconscious and I don't know what's happening, Mitchell Johnson feels like he's bowling underarm to me. That's the sort of level that a normal human being can't get to. And so that's what you're talking about there, Ali. That's the level that's like right at the top. And Rahul Dravid won a World Cup as a coach. And he was saying, and, Kumar Sangakkara's had a lot of experience. And they were both like, we can't teach someone how to do that. We don't know what it is to be able to do the sorts of things to make someone go from a very, very good club player through to a top first-class player and then that top level of test player. Those are the things that people are not 100% sure of. So there is a little bit of art to it, and there's obviously a lot of craft as well.
Yeah, Jared, this is Sunil Gupta for Akashvani in New Delhi, and I've been listening fascinated, actually, to all the stuff that you've been mentioning. You talked about Rahul. But when it comes to Joe Root, what is it that you've noticed about his technique specifically? His decision-making of the years, it's led him to being so close to Sachin Tendulkar.
Yeah, I think one of the big things with Joe Root is the fact that because he's a back foot player, we've seen a couple of players of modern times like this. So Virat Kohli is very much a front foot player, right? Virat Kohli wants to get on that front foot and meet the ball out in front. And Kevin Peterson was another player like that. Joe Root is playing the vast majority of the balls under his eyes, right? Which is, honestly, if we're coming up with a technique, after all these years, we could get rid of the MCC coaching manual. They don't make that one anymore. I'm sure Ali's probably noticed that. It's all disappeared. But if you look at the great techniques, quite a lot of the best players of all time to play the ball right under their eyes. And I think that's a huge advantage for Joe Root in being able to do that, which means that if it is a little bit faster than he thinks it's going to be, or if it's moving more, he has the ability to adjust to that in a way that another player who's pushing at the ball may not have that ability. And if you look at him against spin, he's almost algorithmic against spin. He either plays the ball like 2.5 meters down the pitch, or he plays it right back on his stumps. He never gets trapped in that middle bit. So it's little things like that with Root that I think give him a big advantage over a lot of other players. But it also comes down to the fact that he has a beautiful bat swing. Right. And I think sometimes we kind of forget that, look at someone like Ben Stokes. One of the reasons he doesn't average over 40 in Test cricket, despite his obvious talents, is because his bat swing sort of comes down from an angle. So it's not always coming straight. If you watch Joe Root, the amount of times his bat is coming absolutely dead straight to a ball is, that, again, that's the sort of thing that we're all told to do. But most of us have little kinks or bring it in from a different angle. So if you're playing the ball under your eyes with a straight bat swing, you're probably going to hit more balls than a normal human being is going to hit.
I don't think there was a more decisive batsman in the history of the game than Sobers. He was extraordinary. And his bat speed, my goodness. So there's been some great players, and Root's going to be up there. But I have to say, as a person who's watched a lot of cricket, Lara beats them all by a very short margin, because I reckon he could play 3 shots to the same ball, and the other good players only 2. And Gillespie told me that story years ago about he bowled 2 balls exactly the same spot around the wicket at Lara in the hope that he'd either nick off or he'll get LB. The first one went through mid-wicket for 4, and the next one, because Lara was so quick with his ability to adjust, went inside out through extra cover for 4. And he said you can't bowl to people who bat like that. You just can't. So I love this analysis anyway. And Joe Root continues to get better and better and better. And other from the aberration of running down the pitch in the last Ashes series at Edgbaston getting stumped, he's pretty good.
The Lara one is great, Jim. I'll just finish up here. There's a great story about Lara as a child that I tell in the book that Jimmy Adams and Lara told me about, which is he played in a garage with his brother, and it was just him and his brother, and they had a rubber ball, and they put pot plants all around it. And every time you hit the pot plant, you went out. And Lara told me that's where he learned how to place the ball. And there's an innings he plays in England where Athers basically puts a different fielder on a boundary every single delivery. And you can see it. It's like watching someone with a set square or a protractor just decide exactly what angle they're going to do. And when you go back and look at the wagon wheel, you're like, you can't set a field to someone like Lara. And, all batters are different. Lara has that, whereas Sachin had the ability to go out and play his best innings every day, which Lara didn't have. So when you get to the top, you start nitpicking over greatness because these guys are all great.
I love that idea. That it's so common, isn't it, that you hear batters talk about actually their formative years growing up, how that impacted them as test greats as they, matured and got older. Jared, fascinating to get your insights. Thank you so much for being with us on Stumped. That is writer and broadcaster Jared Kimber, who has released a book called The Art of Batting, The Craft of Cricket's Greatest Run Scorers. Thanks for being with us.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
Well, that's all we've got time for on this week's Stumped. My thanks to Jim Maxwell, Sunil Gupta, and to you for listening, and we'll speak to you again soon. Until then, bye-bye.